First Contact with Joshua Poet.
Welcome to First Contact Radio. Talk about all these things we're talking about is because in life, everything is energy. Every single thing that's out there.
It's time to demand the truth.
All right, thank you. Welcome to First Contact Radio. My name is Josh Poet. It's been about 6 months since I've done a show. This is the first time I'm here at Twitch. And continuing on with a long duration of shows. The show started in 2009. Tomorrow is the 11-year anniversary since I started. There's 1,717 shows. Today's 1718 available for you to watch. Probably covered every topic that could be discussed over these last 11 years. Took a little time off here and there, particularly in the last year and a half, 2 years. But I'm back now, and I'm going to be here Monday through Friday. I'm going to be here at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and, maybe half an hour, maybe an hour. We'll just see where it all takes us from here. So the whole point of this show, as it says, as I show in the title, is seeing through the illusion. Now, it's very important that we're able to see through the illusion. And inherent in that statement is the idea that there is an illusion that we need to see through. As we're looking out into the world, in life these days, we definitely see that there is some sort of problem, some sort of illusionary ideas going on in the world. And if we get caught up in them, it's real easy to get lost. So we really don't know what's going on. So what I want to do is I want to start off by taking you on a trip down memory lane, or for those of you who haven't seen the shows, first time down this trail here. This is the website, home website, firstcontactradio.com. Last episode I did was a big episode that ties into what I'm going to talk about today. So last episode was back in April. It was April 22nd, 6 months ago, and a lot has gone on, as we all know, with the lockdown. But at that time, I had done a show, and there's a lot of information that was presented then that has come to light. So let me do a little rundown here of that last show in regards to the coronavirus, because, of course, that is the big issue that we're dealing with these days, the coronavirus. So let's understand a little bit first by going back to see what it was that that this last show was about. All right, so if we scroll down here, we're going to start right in this area here. January 2017, we had Dr. Fauci is making predictions about coronavirus, telling Trump that there was going to be some sort of pandemic during the time in office. Very interesting that he would have that sort of warning or inside knowledge. In October 2019, Johns Hopkins Hospital, in conjunction with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, host a tabletop pandemic exercise in New York. It's called Event 201. This pandemic was to go through the details of what would happen if there was a pandemic, how would they deal with it, and so on. In December 2019, coronavirus, aka the flu, hit California. People got it. They got better. There was no pandemic at that time. Impeachment proceedings are going on. Studies after the fact confirmed that the virus was around longer than reported. And here we have an article here talking about that effect. Coronavirus infections much more widespread than believed. California study suggests. Stanford antibody study estimates COVID is 50 to 95 times. Infected 50 to 85 times more people than testing. This was back earlier in time, back in December and January. January 2020, we are told that the first case arrived, but that the president on January 30th declares a national emergency, imposes travel restrictions between the USA and China, and he was criticized heavily for that sort of maneuver. Now, there's a lot of talk in there about how President Trump didn't do anything. Well, all you have to do is look at your calendar, okay? On your calendar, January 30th comes before February, and it also comes before March. Well, it wasn't until March when Joe Biden was actually starting to come around to realize that Donald Trump had done the right thing. Prior to that, on the calendar that comes before the date when Joe actually said anything, Joe was criticizing what Trump did. So when they're trying to tell you that they were going to do something, they weren't. All you got to do is look at the calendar. The Dems lie. They're about lying, cheating, and stealing. They don't have any other morals in any other way, unfortunately, and that's what we're stuck with. So here we had a president who did something so that we wouldn't go through all kind of problems and was criticized for it. February 20th, in February 2020, during the State of the Union, President Trump gave a warning. It was in the speech, but Nancy Pelosi rips up the warning. We all got to see that, throwing her little temper tantrum there. Then we get into talk about coronavirus tests that were tainted. In February, during a press briefing, the Surgeon General said that masks do not stop the spread of virus. March 20th, we have the New Yorkers reporting cases. Elmhurst Hospital, we're told, is the center of the crisis. It's number one priority of our public hospital system right now. Funny thing about Elmhurst Hospital, as we see here, and you can follow this link, Elmhurst Hospital happens to have a simulation center. And what were they doing at this particular simulation center? Well, they were doing simulations on what would happen if there was the coronavirus. How would they handle it? So the place in New York that we were told was the center of the coronavirus pandemic happened to be a place where there's a simulation center. Okay, so just bringing you up to date on what had happened in the past and what was talked about and known back in March. Okay, so then we have all kind of links about, strange connections with Dr. Fauci, with Dr. Birch, with Bill Gates, histories of them and really some dark ideas about what they want to do as far as extermination and population control and so on. We get into it. April, the CDC changes their rules, and the rules are to make it look like more people are getting this coronavirus. So they changed the rules. Hospitals are reporting more information about the coronavirus for everything, and that became problematic because then the numbers started really being skewed. If we go into May 20th, what we now know, which is what we already knew, but we're convinced to believe otherwise, by the way, the groups that put forth the original data were so wrong, and that are still the groups putting the fraud data. So in other words, back in this event right here, this event 201, the pandemic exercise, the groups that were involved, John Hopkins and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, were the same groups that were putting out the numbers that were so wrong. So wrong. Okay, we're going to jump over here. This is the American Lung Association website. You can go find other medical websites that has this information as well. But if we go down here and it says cold, what is a cold? Colds are minor infections of the nose and throat caused by more than 200 different viruses. Rhinovirus is the most common cause, accounting for 10 to 40% of colds. Other common cold viruses include coronavirus and respiratory syncytial virus. Okay, coronavirus. So coronavirus, we're told, is the common cold. Now, there's been a big debate over these last several months that, oh no, it's something more than just a cold. It's something more. But we're told, whether it's something more or not, that it still contains the coronavirus, the common cold, which was discovered in the human body in the 60s. The only thing is, we haven't been calling this the coronavirus from year to year. We just say it's cold season, it's the flu season. This year they threw a curveball at people. They called it the coronavirus, its official name, and people didn't know what to do. They became freaked out because it was a new term. And then the media, knowing that they had people by the short hairs, were able to go and then tell them that not only is this something new, which it wasn't, but that it is deadly. And then they started going through all of the false information and the disinformation and how deadly it is, how safe it is, back and forth. That's why we had all this confusion. The media is involved with a political push that is taking place with all of this, along with the Democrat Party, and therefore everything became much more convoluted. When it becomes convoluted, we don't really know what's going on, and therefore things become problematic. So let's continue on here. So now we know what the coronavirus is. We know what they've told us to do. And that brings us up to present time. Or this brings us up to articles that have come out since the coronavirus pandemic. Okay, here we have one: mandatory masks have very little to do with the safety and everything to do with social control to keep us in a constant state of confinement. Okay, if everyone is wearing a COVID-19 mask, it telegraphs a society-wide acceptance that the status quo is changed, and with that consensus, other changes can come too. Now, I'd have to say the biggest surprise of this mask wearing situation is how quickly people adapted to the masks. How quickly that they were told by somebody in a political position that they needed to wear this mask. There wasn't any medical checks about this. This was all political. And then instantly, businesses, towed the line, and they started telling people they had to have masks to come into their business, despite the fact that there were OSHA violations going on, that there were problems with putting people in masks. Despite this, there was a knee-jerk reaction, and people weren't asking these questions. They were just scared because the media told them they were going to die from this virus. A virus which we have found out is a 99.96% chance of survival. Okay, so 0.04% chance that you're going to get this and you're going to die from it. Now, as we find out with the older folks, the numbers are a little bit lower, but they only go down still to 94%. And the CDC came out with information a couple weeks ago saying that it's actually 6% is the correct number of the total amount of cases that people that died from the COVID, not the full number. So 94% of what they have been saying has been a lie. 94% of the people dying from COVID, according to their own CDC website, have come because they had comorbidities. In many cases, unfortunately, these people were going to probably die anyway because they were sick and the coronavirus came in. It was that last straw. It didn't matter what it was. The wind could have blown too hard and these people might have had a bad go at it. But the coronavirus, as the CDC says, only actually killed 6% of the people. So when they say there's 200,000 people, well, take 6% of that. 10% of that is 20,000. 6% is just, a little more than 10,000. What, 12,000? So we're talking about 12,000 people, actually, as opposed to 200,000. That's a big difference. We've been lied to, we've been played, and people are still going along with the ruse. It's all about the social conditioning at this point. Let me continue on with this mask information that's come out since. Here is one that says face masks make you stupid. This one came out in July. In Just Murillo's analysis of false confessions and totalitarian regimes, The Rape of the Mind, he coins a phrase for dumbing down of critical resistance, minuticide. In the totalitarian regime, he wrote that the doubting, inquisitive, and imaginative mind has to be suppressed. The totalitarian slave is only allowed to memorialize, to salivate when the bell rings. Okay, it says face mask makes you susceptible. They make you more likely to follow someone else's directions and do things you wouldn't otherwise do. Right? We've all seen the face masks. People wear them. They think that because they're wearing them, they could say whatever they want to say. They can act however they want to act. We could see it's sort of virtual signaling what's going on there. People don't wear a face mask and other people freak out. If you go to the stores and you pick up the boxes that have the face masks in them, you can actually read on the side of the box that they don't protect you against contagions or viruses or infections. Some even say that you don't get protected by the coronavirus from these. Nonetheless, these are sold by stores to people who think that these masks are actually doing any good when in fact we're told they're not. All right, this article here came out. What are we going on here? I got a problem. Sweden's disease expert says just wearing face masks could, and it seems like the page is being problematic. I don't know what the heck it is. Could make you stupid. It's hurting you. I don't know. All right, this page isn't going to go, so let's jump to the next one here. Mask mouth. This one came out in August 5th. Mask mouth. You've heard of this? It's a serious, stinky side effect of wearing a mask. It says, sign up, bad breath can't just be covered up. Now that dentists have reopened their doors, they're having patients show up with a nasty set of symptoms, which the doctors have dubbed mask mouth. This new oral hygiene issue, caused by, you guessed it, wearing a mask all the time to prevent the spread of coronavirus, is leading to all kinds of dental disasters like decaying teeth, receding gum lines, and seriously sour breath. We're seeing inflammation in people's gums that have been healthy forever and cavities in people who've never had them before, said Dr. Rob Ramondi, a dentist and co-founder of One Manhattan Dental. About 50% of our patients are being impacted by this, so we decided to name it mask mouth after meth mouth. The term meth mouth is widely used by dentists to describe the dental problems that arise among methamphetamine users. Addicts often end up with cracked, black and brown stained teeth because the stimulant causes sugar cravings, teeth grinding, and jaw clenching. They often neglect their oral hygiene. Well, mask mouth isn't quite as obvious. If left untreated, the results could be equally harmful. Okay. Here is a article came out on July 14th. Masks are neither effective nor safe. A summary of the science. At the writing, there is a recent surge in widespread use by the public of face masks when in public places, excluding for extended periods of time. In the United States as well as in other countries, the public has been instructed by media and their governments that one's use of masks, even if not sick, may prevent others from being infected with SARS-CoV-2, the infectious agent of COVID-19. A review of peer-reviewed medical literature examines impacts on human health, both immunological as well as psychological. The purpose of this paper is to examine data regarding the effectiveness of face masks as well as safety data. The reason that both are examined in one paper is that for the general public as a whole, as well as for every individual, a risk-benefit analysis is necessary to guide decisions on if we are to wear a mask. Okay, precautions are necessary, we're told, before just putting a mask on. Here, Dr. Blaylock, face masks pose serious risks to the healthy. With the advent of the so-called COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen a number of medical practices that have little or no scientific support as regards reducing the spread of this infection. One of these measures is the wearing of facial masks, either a surgical type mask, a bandana, or N95 respirator mask. When this pandemic began, and we knew little about the virus itself or the epidemiological behavior, it was assumed that it would behave in terms of spread among communities like other respiratory viruses. Little has presented itself after intense study of this virus and its behavior to change this perception. This is somewhat of an unusual virus in that for the vast majority of people infected by the virus, one experiences either no illnesses, which means they're asymptomatic, or very little sickness. Only a very small number of people are at risk of potentially serious outcomes from the infection, mainly those with underlying serious medical conditions in conjunction with advanced age and frailty, those with immune-compromised conditions, and nursing home patients near the end of their lives. There is growing evidence that the treatment protocol issued to treating doctors by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, mainly intubation and use of ventilator, may have contributed significantly to the high death rate in these select individuals. Face mask. Neurosurgeon expresses concerns over wearing face masks. Many in the medical field are disputing Dr. Blaylock's claims and do not see wearing a mask risk serious health risk to people, although people who have breathing difficulties, such as those with COPD, smokers, may be adversely affected. Noted the mask weaken the immune system. While most concede that hypercapnia is possible, they say it is highly unlikely, especially with cloth masks. Okay, so you can go in here. So you can see now the doctors are fighting with each other. Some say it's going to work. Some say masks work. Some say masks don't work. Therein lies the problem, because we're not getting a straight answer. Which one is it? Do they work? Do they don't work? But you're seeing a lot of examples saying that they don't, and a lot of concern. Let's see, this one still isn't coming up, but it says Sweden disease expert says wearing masks could be dangerous. Okay, now, here is the kicker to all of this, okay? We've been wearing, or I haven't been wearing a mask. I'll be honest. When I go into the store, I pull up a bandana because I got tired of being chased around the stores by the zombies who are telling me that I got to wear a mask because the TV told them or because corporate told them. So after first couple of times of being chased around, I just don't want to hassle with it. But I don't wear a mask anywhere else. I don't feel the need to wear a mask. But I see all kind of people wearing their masks in cars, windows rolled up, gloves, masks, goggles, 90-degree weather, and they're just going on about their business wearing these masks. Now, if we think about it logically, we have this hole in our face that we breathe oxygen into. We have a couple of others in our nose where we inhale and exhale as well. These holes, if they're blocked, means that we don't get as much oxygen in. So when we put a mask over our face, we are actually closing off and partially blocking the holes in our face that allow oxygen to enter. Since we are beings that breathe oxygen, it's important that these air holes are opened up. If they're not opened up, then that's a serious problem. So when we put the masks on, just common sense lets us know that our air supply is going to be reduced to some degree or another. Maybe more, maybe less. Some people, if they have problems breathing already when they put a mask on, then it limits their breathing even more, are even going to have more problems. Now, people say, well, doctors wear these masks when they do surgery. Yes, they do wear the masks when they do surgery. There's also extra oxygen pumped into these surgical rooms to compensate for the fact that they are wearing these masks. So they even understand in the medical profession the importance of making sure that you're breathing properly. Now, one of the other things as human beings we're supposed to do is to exhale carbon dioxide. We're not supposed to continue to breathe carbon dioxide. But yet that is what is happening. We're continuing to be told that we have to be breathing this carbon dioxide that's going on because somehow it's protecting us. So we're getting less oxygen and more carbon dioxide with every breath we take. Eventually, the carbon dioxide is going to overtake the oxygen and our bodies are going to become poisoned. Now, if you go to the market, look at the people who are working there. Do you notice the dark circles under their eyes? I do. Do you notice the dark splotches on their skin? I do. How about the acne on their skin? I do. How about some of them having problems breathing or the sweat running down their back or the headaches that they're complaining about? I've seen and I've heard of all of these. In one really extreme case, one of the cashiers at one of the stores was telling me, there's an older woman, she was telling me when I was there, she was having problems breathing with the mask and she kept pulling it down. She said she couldn't breathe, it was too hot. But the corporation that she worked for said she had to wear that mask. Well, eventually, she went to the back room and dropped dead. I believe it had everything to do with the mask. That's what she was complaining about. That was what was giving her problem with her breathing. Nonetheless, she was told to wear the mask, and she is no longer here. There are other people that you hear of are having problems with masks. All you have to do is a search on the internet, and you find out the reality to this. It's not a very difficult thing to find out. But now that we've had all of these warnings from people who've been thinking logically, you've had doctors come forward saying masks aren't bad. Now we had some new information came out from the CDC today. And look what this information says here. CDC study finds that the overwhelming majority of people getting coronavirus wore masks. Who could have seen that coming? The Centers for Disease Control report released in September shows that masks and face coverings are not effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19, even for those people who consistently wear them. A study conducted in the United States in July found that when they compared 154 case patients who tested positive for COVID-19 to a group of 160 participants from the same healthcare facility who were symptomatic but tested negative, over 90% of the case patients were contaminated with the virus and fell ill despite always wearing a mask. In addition, over 14% of those case patients said they were often wore a face covering and were still infected with virus. The study also demonstrates that under 4% of these case patients became sick with the virus even though they never wore a mask. Despite over 70% of the case participants' efforts to follow CDC recommendations by committing to always wearing face coverings at gatherings with 10 or more, blah, 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 they still contracted the virus. Now, why did this happen? Because this is what doctors who were paying attention said would happen. These masks don't work. They never work. These masks are a control mechanism to see who will follow orders. Who will follow orders blindly? A lot of people, apparently. Before all of this, I used to wonder, and I've had this conversation with others, many others. I used to wonder, how did it happen in Nazi Germany that the Jewish people went along in the way that they did and then were exterminated? It seemed like there were a lot more of them, but they just complied. They just went along. Well, part of it is because the Nazis had guns. So if you take people's guns away, the Jewish people didn't have guns to protect themselves. That was one issue. But then they were just so beaten down, they complied, and then they didn't even want to bother to fight back. So they all jumped on that train and took it to the showers. I tend to think that there would be a lot of people these days, if the situation was the same, that would voluntarily get on that train and would be trying to find other people to get on that train with them. But stupid people do stupid things, and then they lead themselves to their own deaths. And this is the problem we're having. So when all is said and done, how many lawsuits do you think there are going to be? How many businesses are going to get sued because of the OSHA violations that they committed during the course of this time? You know what? I hope Americans step up, and I hope that we see a lot of challenges against these businesses, a lot of challenges against the people who just towed the party line without thinking. The way I see it, if there's a business, that business has employees, there should be some sort of department at that business that looks after these employees, human resources. The human resources should be in charge of the safety of the person that is employed by that company. When somebody said everybody in your company needs to wear a mask, it would have been common sense for somebody in the relations department there to be able to ask the question, are these masks safe for all of the people working here? And if they weren't able to answer that question effectively, then they should have just explored more the issue rather than going forward, because the masks have done more harm than they have done good, and the people at these companies have not done any favors to any Americans. As a matter of fact, so many of these businesses just caved and actually kind of became anti-American, which is kind of sad. But now we know who are the anti-Americans, and we know who will stand up in this country. Found out there's a lot of cowards out there, didn't we? A whole lot of cowards. And I'm sure that there will be more as time continues to go by. Okay, so let's jump over here. Let's see where we're at here. I believe that kind of catches us up on everything that I wanted to talk about with the pandemic, with the virus, with the masks. One of the other things has been the tests that they do. Now, these tests have been tainted. I showed you an article here. You can go follow it from the website link. You can find that the tests have been tainted. But even more than just tainted, I think these tests have been giving people viruses. I know several stories, a number of stories, more than a dozen, where people went in, got a test, were told that the test was negative, and 2 to 3 days later, they ended up getting sick. In some cases, the sickness was the COVID. In some cases, they were never retested. They were just assumed to have it and treated as if they had it. Now, some of these people ended up not having it, and they didn't necessarily get better right away because they weren't being treated for the right thing. They were being treated based on an assumption, because somehow in 2020, our medical profession became a profession of assuming things rather than a profession of scientific inquiry and determining what was the scientific method that was going to work. Somehow or another, we lost our minds and we've accepted the fact that medicine, science can just assume that somebody has something whether they do or not. And people went along with it. If you went into your doctor and your doctor said, you know what, I see that you have a problem with your leg. I assume that it's going to be like that forever. We need to cut your leg off. Would you allow that to happen based on an assumption? Probably not. Would you allow any sort of surgery to happen to you based on an assumption? Probably not. But based on an assumption, look what we've all done. We've allowed ourselves to be treated inaccurately and ineffectively based on an assumption that may or may not be true. And now we're walking through life being told that we may have a virus and we may not. We may have it, may not know. That's the mind control trick they're trying to play on you. People need to be smarter. People need to wake up to the reality that somebody is playing you for a fool. This is a psychological operation, psychological warfare, and it's working very well. Many people are going along with it, but there are many that aren't. And as we continue to weave through this mess, we'll see through all the BS. We'll see through all the BS. You know, one of these links here, I want to go back to it, was a link that happened, maybe I don't have it right here, but early on, Mike Pompeo was doing a interview about the COVID, and he said that the COVID, this was a test. This was an exercise. And President Trump at that point said, oh, I wish you had told me. And then this story just sort of drifted out of our knowledge as if we're not supposed to know that it even happened. So we have a pandemic exercise, event 201. We have a Secretary of State who said this was an exercise. We have Elmhurst Hospital, which was a simulation center. We have stories that we're supposed to wear masks, but now after the fact, 6 months down the road, we find out that these masks don't work and actually have hurt people. And we will probably see some more illnesses from the masks coming forward because people have been breathing their carbon dioxide for months. You tell me that that's good for you? I can't believe that breathing carbon dioxide for months at a time is going to be good for a person. I can't believe that it isn't somehow affecting a person's brain and functioning. Maybe that's why there's so many liberals and people wearing these masks that are acting more like zombies every day. Maybe they're turning into the zombies because of what they're doing in their actual behaviors. So what we need to do is we need to wake up, folks. We need to pay more attention not to what's being told on the mainstream news, because you're not getting the real source there, but we need to scour online for the information from other doctors. Don't rely upon the doctors that are on TV. Probably many of you have doctors that you go to see. Probably doctors that you trust. And I bet you trust your doctor even though your doctor has probably never been on television. So just because these other doctors are on TV doesn't mean you need to trust them. Just because they're on TV claiming to be a doctor doesn't mean they're a doctor. Doesn't mean they're a doctor. We have to be careful. Here in Los Angeles, we have this woman who's running the health program. She looks like she's down a couple pints of blood. The lady who's all white, thinks her name is Farrar, perhaps something like that. But this woman claims to be a doctor, but she's not a medical doctor. She's a doctor in the field of sociology, of social sciences, and social justice. Yet this woman is declaring the health issues of Los Angeles and how we need to deal with them. We shouldn't be having a social justice warrior dictating these things. It's not good. It just destroys things and ruins things. Look at the way that social justice warriors ruin football and basketball, and they're ruining everything else. Social justice warriors just got to go because they're useless. They're wasting their breath and their time with nonsensical issues, and it'd be nice if people just dropped those and just kind of got with the program and believe in America and all the goodness is here. Because these social issues and things they bring up are just about dividing people. Dividing us, dividing the country. It's not good. Okay? So, it's a lot of information. I'm going to make sure these links are available so you can check these out. at your leisure. And let's change gears here for a few moments. Let's check out some things that have gone on about the UFO community, because there have been stories that have come out in these last couple months that we should be aware of. This story here says up to 36 intelligent alien races could be living in our galaxy. Okay, this came out in June and says we are not alone with 36 intelligent alien races living in our galaxy. According to a new study, British scientists have calculated there could be dozens of other extraterrestrial life forms within the Milky Way. But they said it's likely the average distance to such civilizations would be like 17,000 light years, making detection and communication very difficult with our present technology. Their findings, published in the Astrophysical Journal, aim to shed light on the age-old question whether there are other life forms within our universe. The University of Nottingham team said that obtaining good estimates of the number of possible extraterrestrial civilizations had previously been very challenged. They decided to take a new approach to the problem, using the assumption that intelligent life develops on other planets similar as the way it does on Earth. The research team obtained an estimate for a number of intelligent communicating civilizations within our own galaxy, the Milky Way. Now, along the same lines, here's the same story about the same basic issue. Here, more than 30 extraterrestrial civilizations exist in our galaxy. This one was from Earth.com. Recent studies, scientists on the search for extraterrestrial life have found evidence to suggest that we will discover life beyond Earth in the next 10 to 20 years. As more advanced missions are launched to study planets and stars, the chances of finding signs of extraterrestrial civilizations are better now than ever before. The question is, these extraterrestrial civilizations that are out there, how do they view us? Okay, they see us running around here with these space diapers. What are they thinking? These silly, stupid humans, look at them running around there, afraid of their own breath, afraid that they're going to die because there's something in the air that they're supposed to allow their immune system to get used to. I'm sure we're being laughed at. I'm sure we're being laughed at by any other races that are looking at us. I'm sure there's other countries outside of the United States laughing at us. But most definitely, I can guarantee you, ET is laughing at us when they're looking down and seeing what kind of stupidity we're doing. And if we're not being visited, it's that why. That's the reason why. Why would you go down and visit a race that was so stupid and behave the way that we're behaving? Probably wouldn't want to go down there. You probably realize it'd be best just to stay where you are, because the people that are down here on Earth are kind of violent, and the violence seems to be escalating. So if you were a highly advanced civilization, would you come down to a violent area? Probably not. Maybe we need to clean up our act a little bit so that things are a bit different. Now, President Trump was asked about the extraterrestrial issue the other day. He said he'll take a good, strong look on whether UFOs exist. This was during the Maria Bartiromo show. It says President Trump said in an interview on Sunday that he plans on looking further into U.S. intelligence on the existence of UFOs. Fox host Maria Bartiromo asked Trump during Sunday Morning Futures about the Department of Defense's announcement that the Pentagon launched a task force to investigate sightings of unidentified objects in August. The group is called Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, also known as UAPTF. Mr. President, as we wrap up here, are there UFOs? Bartiromo asked. Well, I'm going to have to check on that, Trump replied. I mean, I've heard that. I've heard that 2 days ago, so I'll check on that. I'll take a good, strong look at that. Good, strong look. Well, we really haven't had a lot of presidents who say they were going to take a good, strong look, so it'll be interesting to see what is discovered there. And last UFO related here, it says the phenomena updates the UFO debate through new Pentagon disclosures. This is a documentary, and they were talking about it on the Tucker Carlson show, the filmmaker. And it says the fascination with UFO is hardly new, but revelation in the last few years have renewed interest and speculation on this topic. Enter the Phenomena, an earnest documentary most notable for the former officials that lend credence to the notion that the government knows much more than it has shared. and that the truth is out there. The A-list names include former Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who has publicly advocated to declassify such information. In April, the Pentagon released videos of unidentified aerial phenomena, which include Navy pilots reacting in awe at how fast the objects move. Asked about evidence that has been kept secret, Reid replies on an on-camera interview, saying most of it hasn't seen the light of day. While in office, Reid pressed to fund something called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, a Defense Department unit devoted to looking into such phenomena whose existence hadn't been acknowledged prior to a 2017 report in the New York Times. Director James Fox, who produced the first UFO documentary in the 90s and more recently directed I Know What I Saw, has spent years probing UFOs and goes back to reported incidents through the decades in various corners of the globe, including an Australian sighting in the 60s, another witnessed by numerous Zimbabwe school kids in 94. Brought together as adults, one of those witnesses says there was no reason to make this all up. The vintage footage also includes old interviews with the late astronaut Gordon Cooper, who experienced his own unexplained sighting while flying fighters in Germany in 1951. And former President Gerald Ford, who, while still in Congress, expressed a desire for greater transparency regarding the issue. It's narrated by Peter Coyote, a veteran of Kevin Burns' stately PBS documentaries. The phenomena provides plenty of examples of objects that move in inexplicable ways, seemingly not of this earth ways, and offers insight from UFO researchers such as Jacques Vallée, who provided inspiration for the Lacombe character in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That film and countless others reflect how the project of alien visitors remains alternately thrilling and terrifying as conjured through the prism of science fiction. If you're intrigued by the topic at all, and who isn't, the documentary might be for you. It also brings us to speed of what might be happening today from the particular point of view. Okay, so UFOs is a topic that's been addressed on this show quite often. The title, First Contact Radio, is one that people often ask me, well, shouldn't the show be all about UFOs? Well, kind of is. I think I've expressed plenty of times the notion that what is being presented is not so much about the ships and the technology, but more of the wisdom of the extraterrestrials, more of the wisdom that is brought down. And who's not to say that I might not be one of these aliens that's here on Earth bringing you some of this wisdom? There's plenty of people on this planet that have come from other stars, civilizations, and are here now. So First Contact is about presenting you first contact information of a higher nature, something a little bit more than what this earth is about, because that's really the whole crux of it. To understand what it is that these other civilizations understand, it's obviously something important. They're not all out there to get us. Okay? If they were going to wipe us out, you know what? We'd be gone by now. We'd be gone by now. So there's civilizations that are out there, but they're watching and they're seeing, but they've left a lot of wisdom behind. So in the upcoming shows, what I'm going to get involved with more than talking about the technology is the wisdom, what we have learned from the extraterrestrials that have been here throughout all these years, what we've learned from the books that have been channeled, and the messages that have come from those who are passing and sharing messages from the extraterrestrial sources. There's a lot to learn in these subjects, a lot to know, much, much more than just the technology. Technology is great and it's fun, but the real knowledge is the wisdom of what the extraterrestrial civilizations are here to teach us. And there is what we will get into as we continue to move on with future shows. So, where does that bring us to right now? Well, I'm thinking that let's jump into some important stuff about what we do during these times, because we're being hit with so much fear. Okay, we're being hit with fear every single day. You turn on the television, it's fear, fear, fear. Be afraid of this. Be afraid of that. The politicization of all that is going on has created so much fear, and every subject that is out there seems to be affected. Well, the only way that we are going to overcome this fear is if we take a spiritual mindset to this, a spiritual mindset. Now, the spiritual mindset that we need to take is a spiritual mindset of how to protect ourselves with the armor of God. Armor of God, it's very simple. It's a very, very simple process. I've talked about this numerous times, and you know what? I'm going to talk about it again right now because it is a very important that we understand all about it. So let's get over here. The armor of God. This is Ephesians 6:10-18. So what you could do is you just use your imagination, okay? You use your imagination to be able to bring this activity to reality in your life. Jesus, Buddha, the wise teachers on this planet told us that our minds are very powerful, and what we think about, we can create. If we think about fear, we'll eventually create the fear that we think about. But if we think about faith and love and creating things, we will create those things. If we imagine that there is protections around us, our mind can create these protections that we need. If we look at the words of the various texts in the books that are out there by the spiritual teachers, they're filled with words that we can use to invoke such protections around ourselves. Words that have power because they have been used by many, many others for long periods of time, and therefore these phrases and these words gain such power. So we use our mind to create. And so the armor of God. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after having done everything to stand, stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all of the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit and on all occasions with all kind of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert, keeping on praying for all the Lord's people. Okay? So we use our imagination. We imagine this armor, invisible armor just around our bodies. Imagine the invisible shield and the sword and all this protection. So when we go out into the world to encounter whatever it is we have to encounter, we're protected. We need to do this because at the heart of everything is energy. We live in a world that is a world of energy. A world of energy where there's all kind of ideas and energies bouncing around within these fields of energies. These energies affect us. So we need to protect ourselves. And by putting this armor on and just imagining and then doing this day in, day out, you will find that you will strengthen your protection around you, and you'll find that the little things that may affect you in the past no longer affect you. There's some magic to it, if you want to call it that. I like to think of the term of magic as an acronym for magic, man and God in communion. Or you can take the word man out and just replace it with mind and God in communion. But it's a communion, a connection between us and that divine source. And we all have the ability to connect in, and when we do, great things can happen. And one of the simple things is the protections that we need to put around ourselves each and every day. So, as we go into the world and we deal with all of the lies that are being told, as we're dealing with all of the the misrepresentations. I think it's very important that we continue to protect ourselves. Now, one thing that might help us to understand a bit is this book right here. I often refer to the Nagamati Library as a very important series of texts that talk about not only Jesus, but talk about the important lessons that we need to learn from life, the spiritual lessons, the important histories of what went on to bring some of these problems to our planet. This particular book here is called The Reality of the Rulers, or the hypostasis of the Archons. The Archons are the rulers. They're the ones who are out there helping and working with the demonic beings and characters to influence us in different ways in life. This particular book is one focused on these Archons, who they are, what they're about. And the main Archon, his name was Samael. You can also call him, Satan, devil. It says, because of the reality of the authorities, inspired by the spirit of the Father of truth, the great messenger, referring to the authorities of the darkness, told us that our contest is not against flesh and blood, but against the authorities of the universe and the spirits of wickedness. I have sent you this because you inquire about the reality of the authorities. Their chief is blind because of his power and his ignorance and his arrogance. He said with his power that he was God and there was none others. And when he said that, he sinned against all. His speech rose up into the incorruptible part of life. And then there was a voice that came forth from that incorruptibility. And it told Samuel, you're wrong. You're the God of the blind, and there is a God, and it ain't you. Well, that didn't sit too well with Samael, and as you can continue to read on, humankind was created. Humankind was created in effort to try to trap that Spirit of God, to be subservient to it, but none of that worked out. But this book is a great book to help you understand some of the origins of this evil here on this planet. And when we begin to understand there were beings that had bad intentions and that were misleading us, that will help us to understand how we can get away from their teachings to understanding the teachings that are truthful. There's always been this deception coming our way from evil. That's what it's about. It's about deceiving people. But we have our ability through our mind, through the gifts that we are given from the Holy Spirit, to use our discernment to be able to see through all the problems. So seeing through the illusion is the key. It's going to be the key to helping us get through life so that we don't get run over by all of the problems that continuously go on. We need to be able to see through this illusion and understand its inability to affect us the way it does when we think it's very powerful. Sort of like seeing The Wizard of Oz, and then you see behind the curtain and you realize it's just a man back there. Well, a lot of these illusions going on in life are the same way. They appear to us as if they're bigger than they are until we really get a good look at them and the power dissipates. The Democrat Party, they like to use particular plays over and over. One of these plays is Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radical Number 1. Power is not what you have, but what others think you have. So they present a continual deception, deceiving people by telling them they have more power than they actually do, hoping that people are going to believe it. It's just a bluff. And it works until people start asking questions and calling their bluff, at which point you find out these people can't do the things they said. For example, a number of these states, the Democrat states, the governors decided they were going to impose certain lockdown restrictions upon people. Some very draconian measures. And they would just announce, we're going to do this. And then somebody would come forward and say, Governor, you can't do that. At which point they would then backtrack because they were then called out. And once they were called out, then they said, well, then we'll do this instead. Always wanting to take the most power that they have available to them but never for the right purposes. So we need to be able to see through illusions, see through the illusion and the deceptions of the people here on earth. And if we can do that, we'll be much better off for it. We'll be so much better off for that. So there you have it. That's the goal, to see through the illusion. We have 20-some days, 22 days until we have the big election here in America. Right now, there's a big illusion that's going on. If you've listened to my show and seen things long enough, I don't mince words about my support for President Trump. I don't consider myself a Republican. I've always been an independent, but I've studied the New World Order for years. I've studied the fake news for years. And I've been following along to see them expanding year in, year out. President Trump's the first president that's come around that isn't for the New World Order. That's why they all hate him. That's why you have members of the Bush family supporting Joe Biden. You have McCain's wife supporting Joe Biden because they're all together New World Order people. And the New World Order people are upset because their whole program they've been trying to put in place for all of these 70-some years is in jeopardy of being torn down. You see, John F. Kennedy was killed by the deep state. That same deep state that killed John F. Kennedy, for all of these years, since 1963, for the 57 years since then, they have grown stronger. They have grown more powerful. They've expanded throughout the world into more businesses and more places. Their tentacles are in much more areas than they used to be. So it's not so easy to drain the swamp as some people would like it to be. There's a lot of characters out there, a lot of swamp creatures. So be patient. The process will happen. It's getting there slowly, but just be patient and all will be well. All will be well. I trust indeed that is the case. Okay? So there you go. That's the show for today. That's First Contact Radio. Let's close things out with a small prayer. I like to do this. Heavenly Father, I pray this day that all those listening and watching this show find themselves seeing clearly through the illusions that life is throwing their way. I pray for our president and his family, that they remain safe and protected during these times, for we know that there is heavy, heavy pressure put upon him and his family. I pray for our country, that we may see through all of the challenges and the lies that are being told to us, and we may find our way past all of these deceptions to put ourselves on the path of righteousness that we need to remain upon. And I say all these in Jesus' name, amen. My friends, my brothers and sisters, we're going to be okay. I have no doubt about that. We just have to keep the faith. During these next 3 weeks, the Democrats are going to throw everything at us, everything at the process to try to create doubt and fear. Don't get caught up in that. Stand strong. Stand strong in your belief in God. Have faith in yourself, in each other, and we're going to get through all of this. And then after we get past all of this and we get into November, we're going to take a deep breath and we're going to be able to move forward, seeing much more clearly. God's in charge. We just have to keep trusting the process. That's it. I'll be back tomorrow with more news information. Till then, be safe. God bless. And I will talk to you later. Peace. I'm out of here.